The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Yes, we are born to be alive. You're listening to Rosie Pekar on Until Now on W4CY. And if you'd like to join the live chat, go across to w4cy.com and just click on the right-hand side. And as I was listening to that song, I was thinking the words nearly need to be changed for some of you in parts of the world to born to be wet and wild, because I know you've certainly had some extreme weather systems, and good to know some of you are here. Thank you. So you're not without power. I know they're within the US and especially areas of Florida and down by Texas that have been experiencing extreme difficulty with the weather. So I wanted to use this program for any situation in life that is extreme, difficult or challenging. And, you know, for those of you that have been listening for a while now know that's where I come from. You know, I may have come from law enforcement, but I choose to be a feel-good facilitator. Oh, thank you. Wet and Wild used to be a water park in Florida. Well, it certainly will be a water park right now, from what I hear. And again, yes, I'm going to make light of certain situations because of the fact in life, we're not going to get out of life alive, you know, so we might as well make every moment matter and as enjoyable as we possibly can. And, you know, these shows are restreamed later because people say, how come you focus so much on the US or talk about the US, even though I'm from Australia? And yes, you're right. I don't think Texas and Florida people can join us tonight. No, not without the power out. I heard, you know, it's millions still without power. However, these shows are later restreamed on iHeartRadio under Until Now. So, and I know there's a lot from within the US that listen to these programs after the live recording. So I make sure that what I share is of value, not just in this moment right now that I'm speaking to all of you, but long after the fact. And that's what's important to me, is because these moments that we have right now, whether they're moments that feel good or moments feel bad, if we can master the moment, we can manage to master our lives. Now, it's when these moments turn into minutes that magic happens. And that's only the magic happens when we're in the moment the way we want to be. Now, when we're faced with adversity, challenges, overwhelming difficulty, we get stuck into a feeling pattern. And people say to me, Rosie, why do you always focus on feelings? You know, this schmoozy stuff, as they say in Australia, and especially, you know, the blokes, as we call them over here. Oh, feelings, schmealings. Who cares about feelings? It's like everyone cares about feelings, because every single second that we are alive, we are feeling, thinking, breathing human beings, you know, so we can't divorce ourselves or divide ourselves and separate ourselves off or away from our feelings, and neither should we. Our feelings are an indicator of how we're traveling in this life, whether we're mastering those moments or those moments are mastering us. You know, it's in Australia, you know, you can, the tail can wag the dog or the dog can wag the tail. It's a similar scenario that right now that we're learning to use moments that we're the creators of our experience. And I'm just going to see what a comment is here. I have a friend that was going to use the remaining power in a phone to listen, but her husband said they need to conserve phone use for needs. Wow, that's a huge, massive compliment. Let her know afterwards. It's restreamed on iHeartRadio, so she needn't ever miss an episode. And I agree with her husband that they really need to conserve that phone use for emergency needs right now. But I take that compliment to heart, because as I'm talking about feelings, that makes what I do matter in this moment tremendously. So it's not normal for us to get in a funk. However, it's extraordinarily commonplace. You can think of people around you that aren't going through these extreme difficulties right now, that are just their average everyday reality. They sit in a funk. Oh, that's sweet. She just wanted to keep some sort of normal in all this mess. Well, it's available after the fact, and I'll make sure that, this one is put up on iHeartRadio, because not all episodes go up on iHeartRadio, but most of them do, so that way, yes, it is important to keep some normal, but it's also important to find a better space that it becomes our home base, our home space. And again, this is something I had to learn through life. I didn't have it naturally. Good. I'm glad she's going to be tickled to hear it later. I'm tickled to be telling it. For myself, I grew up in an environment where I had people around me that, they come from a war-torn era, and a lot of difficulty, a lot of harshness within life, a lot of deprivation. So their mindset and their language and their communication revealed and reflected that. However, when I was growing up as a child, they were in much better circumstances than they ever had been, yet everyone still spoke the same way from the Depression. And those of us that are older will certainly know that. We're not the same now as we were in our 20s or in our 30s. However, what we have is this amazing tool that I learnt the use of and have been spending the past 30 years developing, so that we can master it in mere moments. I titled this episode, How to Overcome Racial, Political, Religious and Gender Conflict and Extreme Difficulties in Moments. Now, that's a massive claim. I know it sounds like, oh my God, Rosie, who do you think you are, God? Well, yes, we all are. We all have God within us. So, I've got access to that, as every other individual walking the planet has. However, it's moments that we are always given. It's a moment that you're guaranteed. Right now, you're breathing. You have this moment. But within this moment, you also have the power to determine, how are you going to spend this moment? How are you going to use this moment? How are you going to invest it? How are you going to savor it? How are you going to spend it? This is your moment. It's not anybody else's moment. This is your moment. You get to dictate and determine how it is spent. And you know what? Your body will tell you, because it's the body of evidence left behind that doesn't lie, of how you've been spending it. So, you look at those faces that we had the, celebrity facial expert on previously, who talked about the permanent lines, the downturned mouths, the mouths that aren't smiling that much, they become permanent lines. Well, wrinkles should indicate where smiles have been. And, sometimes you have to fake it till you can make it. And it's those moments that I mentioned before. When moments turn into minutes, you get the magic happening. So, yes, it is hard to get back to what you used to after a tragic situation. I'm not in denial of that. I worked as a police officer for many years. I've seen children abused, traumatized, the grotesque things human beings can do to other human beings. However, out of that, I've also seen the human beings that are remarkable, that despite whatever they have gone through, they manage to flip the switch, because everything is like, picking up a stick. It has two ends to it. One end of the stick might be stress and difficulty. The other end of the stick might be harmony and ease. One end of the stick might be anxiety. The other end of the stick might be being aware. One end of the stick might be hate. The opposite end is love. One end of the stick is failure. The opposite end is success. And we can really simplify this down. One end of the stick is being unhappy. The other end of the stick is being happy. So then everyone goes, well, Rosie, I seem to have the unhappy end facing me. How the hell do I get it round the other way? Well, that was certainly my question to myself. How was it, that I was having, a funk that I was caught up in? And, as I said, it can be extraordinarily commonplace. And since it appears with such regularity and at times all-consuming ferocity amongst all walks of life amidst the human race, it does need addressing. So a funk is a rut. So we've got it really clear. And I call a rut an Aussie acronym for repeating useless thoughts. That's that RUT, a rut, repeating useless thoughts. And they're useless because they're self-defeating beliefs. They're endorsing ideas that somehow we're less than we should be. We've adopted them from someone else's said it, and we've just let it in through our filter without actually addressing it or stopping it at the gates. And this happens generally before the age of 3. So people say stuff around us. They say, life's tough, life sucks, life's a bitch, and then you die. Whatever that negative crap is that you hear in whatever language you hear it in, there's all forms of it. But then you hear other people, life is a roller coaster. Well, that sounds more ups and downs. Life is exciting. That's a bit more interesting to me. Oh, life is intriguing. Life is fascinating. Wow, life is amazing. Life is incredible. Now, if you're staring down, a tornado, life still is amazing. Now you're going to go, Rosie, you've really lost the plot, or you're not the one standing in front of the tornado. Well, you're probably right on both counts. I'm not standing in front of a tornado, but I have lost the plot. I've lost buying into the mentality that says we all must face reality. We all must keep our face to the grindstone. We all must keep, watching the news, watching the difficulty, absorbing the problem, the difficulty, the blah, blah, blah. Now, I said before, we've all got the same allotment of time. We've all got one moment following another moment following another moment. All those moments then add up to minutes. Is that how I want to spend my minutes? Is that how I want to spend my moments? Facing moment by moment of difficulty, crap, dilemma, problem, challenge, blah. It's like sitting me down to eat a meal and, putting a buffet of all the choices right there in front of me and going, no, Rosie, this ain't your end. You haven't got the pass to attend this buffet. There's yours over there. And it's a lonely little table with nothing but the burnt food, the rotten food, the crappy expired food. Why on earth do I want to eat at that? Now, it's not that we do this deliberately. We do this out of habit. We do it out of a thing called autopilot. And it's just easy. It's what we're used to. We are a repository, a collection of all the habits that have gone moment by moment, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, some of us decade by decade before. This stuff just flies under the radar. And it's only when it slaps us in the face or it's slammed into our face with such obviousness that we then go, okay, I'm going to face it. And yes, this does happen when we settle. We settle for accepting less than the best for ourselves. And the first place we settle is in our own minds. We got this self-talk happening 24/7, whether we like it or not. It is going moment by moment, non-stop. So it's in our best interest to get that moment by moment working for us. So how do we change that acceptance that we have of somehow less than we should be? Well, to remain in a rut is simple. Just keep repeating those useless thoughts until you wind up dead in the head while still alive. And we know lots of people, if you've lived long enough, you've met enough of them that exist around you that live like that. Inspiration does come from within. It's your self-generated ideas. And I like to think of it as it's inspired, it's spirited, it is spirit within us. And whatever religious background you're from, it's irrespective. You believe in something you can't see. You believe in something that is more powerful. And, as my son, he comes home from school and he says, Mum, there are kids there that don't believe in God and, don't believe in spirit or don't believe in any of this. And I said, well, honey, that's not your issue. You attend that buffet and you get to pick up and select from the buffet of life experiences, which is the people you meet, what's going to work for you, what you think feels good, what tastes good, what sits good, what you resonate with. Does it make you feel good to think that you're the most powerful person on this planet? Hell no. I didn't make the planet. I didn't make the universe. I didn't make the stars. That's not a feel-good thought for me. So it sits comfortably for me to know that I have access to what made the universe, what made the stars, what made the planet, what helps make me on a daily basis. That makes me feel empowered. And that works the same way for my son. If it works for you, fabulous, keep it. If it doesn't work for you, find what does. This is not a one-size-fits-all mindset place. That's the beauty of buffets. It's the beauty of beliefs. There's something for everybody. It may not suit everyone to adopt the same thought. We don't see a garden with just one type of flower, one type of leaf, one type of plant. It would be boring and monotonous. And being in a creative space and place, boredom and monotony does not exist here. Yes, challenge and difficulty does when we feel we're powerless in a situation. And that's the worst state. I've mentioned this on previous programs, that a human being can ever find themselves in is feeling vulnerable or at the mercy of circumstances. So what I'm sharing today is how to overcome that. So one listener's asked, so at what age do we go to the buffet? When we are kids, we have to eat what is put on our plate or starve. Yeah, well, the good thing is you actually won't starve. I went 40 days without food and played squash during that time. So, and most of us don't have to go 40 days without food anymore. And so does my mate Don Tolman, who then runs marathons after the 40 days with no food. But yes, you do as children, you get the same diet that your parents get. You are spoon-fed your beliefs. So it's a really good acronym that you've used there and a really good question. You are spoon-fed those beliefs. And you see children, despite our best efforts to teach them good manners, they end up copying their parents. And I watched this the other day. It's beautiful weather here where I am on the Gold Coast at the moment, and I'm right alongside the ocean. So I have the good fortune of being able to ride my bike with my child, and it's a 20-30 minute bike ride to his school. And I go with him because not all drivers are paying attention, and I make sure they do. Mama bear's on the road, look out. So on this occasion, there was another gentleman, and again, I use that language loosely at times when I refer to people, who was riding with his 4 children. And he was a big, brute of a man. Really, really big, don't mess with me kind of big. And he's riding along with his 4 kids. And I missed what actually occurred, but I could hear his voice. And it was bellowing, and he was pissed. He was so angry. And by the time we've come around the corner, there is his bike laying down on the pathway, on the footpath, blocking so no one can walk past. He was making sure he had his moment on center stage, and he was going to take it. If this was a Shakespearean play, he was the main actor right now, and everything else was going to stop because he deemed it so. And he was screaming and bellowing, and it's because of people like you, all the rest. And I came up behind him, and I stopped right beside his bike, and I thought, I actually can't get past because he's blocking, and Dane's behind me. And I just looked at him with a look on my face that sort of said, excuse me, please. But I wasn't going to say anything right now because he was in such a volatile state. And when people are like that, they're on a hair trigger, we call it, response. It's only going to take the tiniest bit because they've already been set off. They've already got such a high state of anger flowing that they're just ready for the next thing to come along to keep that anger going. They've run those moments now into minutes. They're on a roll. They're on a roll in this energy, and it's a freight train. And just get out of the way. And my son, I'm obviously setting an example to him at the same time as how does mum handle this person in deep anger, deep rage. He's looking at me with a dirty look like, how dare I show up there and be wanting to get past where he's in the middle of his bike road rage tirade. And you could see it interrupted his pattern, and he was even more pissed off about that because there's no reason to be angry at me. I'm just biking along, but I want to keep going. So he is more or less forced to break his habit. He's forced to break that pattern. He has to come, well, he doesn't have to, but because he can almost see the irony that whatever he's proclaiming this person has done interfering his path of way, he's now doing to me. He's done nothing to him. So he comes over to pick up his bike, and it was that pattern interrupt that broke the energy. So he's still in a huff, but he gets back on the bike and he keeps going now because now there are other witnesses, whereas I'm not entering into it and I'm just observing. And he went off in one direction that we normally go. And I said to Dane, no, we're just going to go this other path this time. And he said, why is that, Mum? And I said, because right now that's a very, very angry person, and hurt people hurt people. They've already got that energy running and rolling, and it's taken over control of them. They're no longer mastering their minds are mastering them. So it's like when you step on a lemon, all that's coming out of that lemon is lemon juice. It ain't no sweet apple juice. And right now, he's a lemon. He's going to be bitter. And until he releases that energy, he can release it with the exercise. He can release it with breathing, which is the first technique that I have for today for whatever difficult situation that you are currently facing or that you will face, because all of us are guaranteed to get them. There's no one that's left out of this equation, is to breathe. All you need to know about your life and to master and control your life is how to breathe. And thank God for that, because we sort of do it automatically. And the day you're not breathing, you don't need to worry about it anymore. So as a listener's asked, how can you release the energy that's negative from your mind? It's use that breath. So, right now, just take a really deep breath in, the deepest that you possibly can. And as you fully inhale, just get to the point where you can't breathe in anymore and just sneak a tiny bit more. Get that little bit more in and just hold it for a split second and then fully release it back out. And do that 2 more times whilst you're listening to me. So just the biggest, deepest breath that you possibly can. Put all your attention, all your focus only on your breath. Now, the benefit of what you're doing right now, the fact is that you are now oxygenating all of your blood. Now, your blood covers, if your blood right now at your fingertips, it'll be back at your fingertips again after traveling the whole course of your body in under a minute. So all of your blood is continually moving throughout your body, but your blood doesn't work well unless it's oxygenated. So as you take a big breath, and any moment you stop, that you're stuck in queues, waiting in traffic, got time to, I won't say kill, to use, invest it in you. Use this big, deep breath to your benefit, because your body will love you. You are blessing your body with this breath, because oxygen is what your blood needs. It gives you superhuman performance if you can oxygenate your blood, and every cell that receives oxygen from your blood doesn't need to die. If it remains oxygenated, it can stay vibrant and vital and healthy. So you're giving yourself a gift, but also in that moment that you're choosing to focus on taking a big, deep breath, you are doing an intentional pause. And that intentional pause is the break in the brain that you need to derail it from its current course of action, its current pathway. And remember, one moment leads to the next moment, leads to the next, that leads to minutes. And once it's made it to a minute of any particular moment, be that moment one that feels good or one that feels bad, that's what you've set the pathway on. So that's why these moments matter. And they matter because they materialize in our reality, in our life, as our experience. So use that breath for the negative situation. And just, they used to say, count to 10. I would say to people, think on the fact, are you going to remember this situation in 5 years' time? If you're not going to be repeating and talking about it in 5 years' time, why are you investing any further time in it at this moment? Remember, we all have allocated that same level of time. And people will say, oh, I don't have time, I'm running out of time, not enough hours in the day. What rubbish. We've all got exactly the same amount of time, but how do you use it? How do you choose to invest it? So how fast does the blood move through you? Let me see. I actually watched a program, Dr. Mosley, I love him, he's in the UK, and he shared a program all about blood just recently, and I wrote about it in my first book, Time to Kick Butt, a little bit about the human body. But your blood is phenomenal in the fact that you have 5.6 litres or 6 quarts of blood, as you Americans like to say. This 5.6 litres of blood circulates through the body, they say 3 times every minute. Dr. Mosley said once every minute, or at least once. So I guess that depends on how active we are, because the more active we are, the faster the blood moves. So in one day, that blood travels a total of 19,000 kilometres, which is 12,000 miles. So that's 4 times the distance across the US from coast to coast. So if all your arteries, your veins and capillaries of the human circulatory system were laid end to end, the total length would be 100,000 kilometres or 60,000 miles. So that's nearly 2.5 times around the earth. So your heart beats about 35 million times in a year. Every single one of those beats is a moment that matters. So this breathing, as my son, because we were pedaling pretty fast then, and he was breathing really rapidly and really shallowly. And yes, as one listener's commented, short breathing is what people get used to, and most people don't deep breathe. That's correct. And I was one of these in that most people category. I discovered what a shallow breather that I was. And, I had lived a life in my earlier years of one that I guess mentally I didn't want to invest too much into that life, the difficulties that I was experiencing. So it's not surprising that I learnt this taking only short breaths, like not really filling myself up. And again, I was running on a I don't feel worthy program. So it's not surprising that I didn't drink deeply from that wellspring. Whereas this is what we all have access to. So take that big, deep breath. As my son was breathing very shallowly, I said to him, honey, stop. And he's going, no, I can't breathe, Mum, I can't breathe. And it's like, well, of course you can't breathe when you're there going, like the dog panting. You can't possibly get enough oxygen in. And this is how some people, they live their lives. They're in so much of a hurry, in so much of a rush. They're trying to get more in that sense of getting more of their life crammed in, get to the gym, get to work, meet that lunch, get that agenda done, get blah, blah, blah. And as they're trying to get more in, they actually get less. They miss out on those moments. So, today there will be those that are going to sleep depending on where in the world you're listening. But as you start the day afresh, as you sit down for that first meal, just savor those moments. Savor the fact that you are breathing. Breathe it in. As you breathe it in, count your blessings, that you are able to breathe it in. Savor it, that you can feel every part of your body or whichever parts of your body are working really well. And then determine within your own mind how you're going to invest and spend it for the rest of your day. This is your opportunity to move from repeating those useless thoughts to being self-generated, being inspired, that is full of life, that is full of opportunities. Anything that is expired comes from outside of ourselves. The past is expired. It's all that's been. That's gone before and it's done. That's past. There's no life there. So stop looking out there for your life, for what's been in the past. It doesn't amount to you. Anything in the past is not your recognition and your rewards and appraisal. Would you compare a leaf that is living, that is alive, to a dead, shriveled up leaf? Of course not. There is no comparison. Yet we, interestingly enough, keep doing that. We keep looking at the dead leaves of our past and expect to feel thrilled or filled up from that. Or we beat ourselves up mentally that it's not enough. And yes, as one listener's commented, it's only then can we invest in relationships, because relationships are our life. Hey, Beanie, good to hear you. Yes, it is. The first off is ourself first, because the relationship you're guaranteed to have for your entire life is your own. So if you get that one mastered first, you don't need it outside of yourselves. You know, I mentioned on another episode that I love Sadhguru, and Sadhguru mentioned he was asked about, soulmates, and he laughed, his deep-throated chuckle, and he was like, oh, your mind wants a mate, if it's bored and, can't excite and thrill you, or your body wants a mate when it doesn't know what to do with itself. But don't put such a hang up on your soul. Your soul, your spirit, it is complete. And we're talking about spirit. So getting yourself right, that relationship with who you've been in the past with who you are today, is what comes first and foremost. So as we're not comparing dead things to live things, we're no longer looking at what's been and somehow thinking what's currently here is lacking. So if you can recognize life that is here and now in the moments as they show up, as you savor those and then choose to spend and invest those in the things that feel good, you are going to not only move out of repeating those useless thoughts, breaking that negative habit, but now you're going to move into what I call an everyday right. And this is right spelt. I'm still using acronyms, everybody. You know by now, Rosie loves her acronyms. RITE. And if it's American, R. No, I can't even do your R's. Yes, I always take the mickey out of you guys. R for Rosie, I for India, T for Tango, and E for Echo. So this right means repeating inspired thoughts every day, because you're thinking thoughts anyway. So let's change those expired thoughts for inspired thoughts. This is where we use our breath. Our breath has all we need to know for successful living. We breathe in, we breathe out. It's a finite experience. We don't hold on to that breath. We don't try to keep it. Like when I had you fill up with the breath before, you reached a point where you couldn't add any more in. You had to let go. It's the same in living our life and mastering these moments. Once the moment has passed, let it go. There's a new moment joining. And as we're attending that buffet of life experiences, even if it's been spoon-fed to you before of what you're going to eat, now you're an adult. Now you get to choose. Now you get to select. You say, is this something that makes me feel good? Does this moment, something that I want to stay in? Now, as I said, in those of you that are facing extremes right now, sometimes you have to find a way to lighten up that moment. And I had to laugh because I was reading recently about, I'm over that age, that plus 50 mark, where they send you the invites to come get colonoscopies, come get mammograms, come get something that we can find something inside you to say you're broken so we can fix you. And I read this from a woman that put forward her 2 bobs worth, as we say here in Australia, to prepare for a mammogram. And if you're a bloke listening, you can do exactly the same to prepare for a mammogram, except instead of using your breast, which you don't have, you can do this at home using a testicle. So this is what the article was that I'm just going to read to you. Many women are afraid of their first mammogram, but there's no need to worry. By taking a few minutes each day for the week preceding the exam and doing the following practice exercises, you will be totally prepared. So this is borrowed with permission from the author, And How Are We Feeling Today by Catherine Hammer. Best of all, you can do these simple practice exercises right in the privacy of your own home. So exercise number 1, freeze 2 metal bookends overnight. Strip to the waist, invite a stranger into the room, press the bookends against one of your breasts, smash the bookends together as hard as you can, and set an appointment with the stranger to meet next year and do it again. And if that first exercise didn't break the ice for you, here's exercise number 2. Open your refrigerator door and insert one breast between the door and the main box. Have one of your strongest friends slam the door shut as hard as possible and lean on the door for good measure. Hold that position for 5 seconds. And repeat again in case the first time wasn't effective enough. And if that hasn't completely got you prepared for your mammogram, you've got exercise number 3, which is visit your garage at 3 o'clock in the morning when the temperature of the concrete floor is just perfect. Take off all your warm clothes and lay comfortably on the floor with one breast wedged under the rear tire of the car. Ask a friend to slowly back the car up until the breast is sufficiently flattened and chilled. Turn over and repeat for the other breast. So, as you can see, yes, I did say testicle. Because that's the only way the blokes can understand what us women have to go through. This is our health system, people. I got to tell you, when I first read that, I couldn't have read it on air if I hadn't have pre-read it beforehand, because I simply cracked up. I found it the most hilarious thing, and it's because it's sadly so true. You know, somehow we think it's okay to invite more painful experiences into our life. You know, there was a health system in China that operated for over 10 years that had a 95% success rate over, I believe, 180 illnesses. And, you know, they did nothing other than breathe and work with the person's thoughts and their energy. You know, no slamming their bits between hard frozen metal things or being, you know, my father, before he passed, he was at the age of 85. He was in a hospital and, you know, they knew he was passing. This was, you know, he'd had so many heart attacks at this point. He's already had most of his bowel removed to bowel cancer. He had prostate cancer. He had an enlarged aorta. He had so many things going on. It was a medical marvel that he'd survived the last 15 years to start with. But he had said to me, I'd been away in Aceh at the time after the tsunami disaster, and he said, you know, I'm at the end of my road, Rose. So I raced to get back to his bedside, you know, from Aceh in Indonesia back to Australia, and I made it back. And he stopped eating and he stopped drinking a few days because he was sick and tired of them attempting to revive what was left lifeless within him. He was really, you know, almost a lifeless corpse, but they were still coming in, poking him, you know, he'd almost be asleep. They'd sit him up upright. And this is, you know, not to bag, you know, nurses and medical staff, because they are amazing people and individuals and they do a really tough and difficult job. And I admire and love them intensely for all that they do. This is to bag the protocol and the system that dictates that they are required to do this, that in his final days, and they all knew he was going to pass, they've still got to come and document and record and poke and prod and draw blood out and tap this. And I watched him in pain, grimacing and, you know, the discomfort. And, you know, it silently broke my heart that despite all the nurses knowing better, they still didn't do better. They followed what was the system and the protocol. And I'm not suggesting everyone go up in arms now and protest in your own way. It's to find more ways that you're in alignment with what is your truth. And you know what your truth is by how you physically feel. If it makes you sick to the core, it can't be what you're doing. You know, your body, as I said, is that evidence that doesn't lie. What you've got left physically at the end, every moment, it's mattered. Your issues have gotten in your tissues. And people go, issues? Well, issues, if we look at the word, it just says it is you. That what is you gets in your issues, gets in your tissues, and is relevant in your life experience, just as that man with the bicycle that was ready to road rage and anger in an instant. And as I rode with my son and we kept going past and we went a different path, he still remained with us long after the moment had passed. My interaction with him was only that moment, but my discussion with my son went for minutes afterwards. And those minutes afterwards was simply to remind him that he has a choice of what he takes into his own life experience. and to say to him, well, aren't you lucky, son, that, you don't come home to an environment where that is the norm? Because the ones I felt sorry for was the 4 children that were riding in stony silence behind the angry man that was remaining angry, not just for moments, not just for minutes, I can guarantee for much, much longer after the fact. So if we can find a way that if breathing doesn't work, the deep breathing to release that negativity in the moment, start counting the blessings, finding a way to lighten it up, to laugh about it, to be able to let it go, just as our breath. We take it in, we use it for what's of value to us, but then we let it go. If the moment is no longer serving us, like that moment with that man, and that's just one moment I picked randomly because it tells a story. But we all know, we all have moments, especially when it comes to holiday time or Christmas and we've got to invite the rellies over, instantly is rehash those moments that were miserable. That have all gone before. We do this in relationships. We're rehashing what went wrong. We're dissecting it. We're doing postmortems. It's not necessary. It's like the breath. You don't try to catch that breath that's left your body and go, oh, come back in. There's a new one. There's a fresh one. There's a vibrant, vital life one. Take that one. So this rite of repeating inspired thoughts every day is a passage. It's creating a new neural pathway in your brain so that barely trod path, it doesn't matter if you've never been along that way before, as you use it with regular use and repetition, it becomes a super freeway. It becomes your go-to place for feeling great. The habit of happiness is dictated moment by moment. We're not waiting for one-off actions or something to happen outside of ourselves. Because as you've listened to me long enough now, you realize that things, they might happen outside of us, but it's what's going on inside of us that affects us, that stays with us long after whatever's happened outside of us has passed. So inside of us is what we can take control of. We use our breath. We use our mind and our thoughts, counting those blessings, but most importantly, we use our ability, our intelligence to let go of what no longer serves us. We all are a collection of our patterns, our habits that we're doing, repeated over time. Sometimes we have to deliberately step in to interrupt the old pattern and habit of being and thinking to deliberately and intentionally pave a new pathway. It's always been an inside job. There's nothing out there that determines us. And yes, there are those that want to argue and say, but it is out there. The floods are out there. The tornadoes are out there. That angry person is out there. The creditors, the bad bank people, whatever, they're all out there. It's not the circumstances that dictate our lives. They reveal our lives. They show us to ourselves. And sometimes that's a harsh slap in the face. As I said, we are a compilation of our habits. These things didn't occur overnight. And you might say, oh, but Rosie, that tornado, it did actually happen just overnight. Well, there's certain people living in the pathway of that tornado, just as there are people who aren't living in the path of that tornado. I don't believe in accidents and coincidences. I believe that growth comes from being uncomfortable. And all of us at different ages, different stages, different places, utilizing different means, use that ability of being, and I'll use the word uncomfortable, to stimulate growth. All order comes from chaos, and our future comes from our present. And our present is what we have that power over. Now, interestingly enough, as we were talking about blood before and, our bodies, on that it wasn't Dr. Mosley's program, it was another BBC program. Because I love collecting stories, as you know by now, about extraordinary or unusual and esoteric and all that other people would say freaky or wacky stuff. Well, that's what life is. Life is pretty freaky and wacky. If you think about it, you're one cell that divided into two and kept dividing and replicated 52 times to now be sitting here on the other end of some technology able to hear me? So we are pretty freaky and pretty wacky. So this show was on about organ transplants, and it talked about how the recipient of the transplant actually received far more than the actual donation of the organ. They actually received like a personality change. And some people want to say, oh, that's just because they've gone through a life-changing, surgery and operation and difficulty that came with it. Well, there's one case that is not to do with that, which I'm going to share, this is one of the most amazing stories, which is one of the biggest issues that they have with organ transplants is finding the correct match with one's own blood type. And that's to stop the receiver's body from attacking the new organ because it sees it as an invasive host, and our immune systems are designed to attack it. However, a lady called Demi Lee Brennan didn't have this problem, being that she's the first known case of having her immune system and blood type match that of the organ she was given. So doctors were absolutely baffled by the occurrence, calling it nearly impossible. And I love that there's so much that, scientists and the medical organisation like to call is impossible or nearly impossible. Demi Lee began the ordeal with O negative blood before receiving a liver from a little boy to replace her own that was destroyed by a virus. After receiving the organ, her condition began to grow worse, and doctors feared that the new liver hadn't been accepted. As she grew more and more ill, doctors decided to take another blood test, only to find out that her body had changed her blood type from O negative to now being O positive, which was the same as the liver she was given. The only reason she was getting so ill wasn't that her body was rejecting the organ, it was that her body was rejecting her old blood type because she was given immune suppressants to help aid this new transplant. So interestingly enough, while all other transplant patients are forced to stay on immunosuppressants for the rest of their lives to keep their body from rejecting the organ, she's the only one who doesn't need them. Her blood changed to be the same blood of the actual transplant she was given. So our bodies, our brains, our breath, everything about our being, our spirit, all knows how to work towards the best for us at all times. Our bodies are always going out of our way to actually help us. We are the ones who hurt ourselves. Hurt people. We are the ones filling ourselves up with thoughts that this is difficult, this is a tragedy. And, there are those, as we said, there's a lot of listeners that aren't able to join in today because they don't have power. They will get power back. Again, homes break down. Homes will be got back. Money can be lost. Money will be got back. And then fortunately there isn't the life count at this point in time. But even then, I know 100% life is the one thing that is eternal. And it's not the life in a meat suit that we get caught up and obsessed about, and whether it looks good or whether it looks floppy or bits are getting jammed between metal things. It's the life that gives us life in the meat tissues, it's that inspiration. It's why is it you are getting up in the morning to start with it? What are those thoughts in your head? If they're leaving you dead, it's time to get new thoughts. If your dream isn't inspiring, it's time to get a new dream. You need moment by moment to make it matter. And this is where we become those masters. We're able to communicate, and from communicating, sharing those feelings that feel good, talking up terrific stories, not talking up the tragedies. We're amping up the appreciation, giving out that love as we communicate and collaborate together. We are always much more. And as we collaborate and celebrate all that we can count right now as being amazing and incredible and wonderful in our existence and our reality right this moment, that's today's people creating tomorrow's world. And that's tomorrow's world that I want to live in. And, we all have this opportunity to give back. I went with my son to see the movies the other day, and it was at a casino where we get it for free when we're members, but children have to pay $5 because they're not old enough to be members. You have to be over 18. So as I was lined up in the queue to purchase my son a ticket, this elderly gentleman has joined the queue of all these other people that they're just grabbing their own tickets with their card, getting a free one. And he's grabbed the free one and he's passed it to my son. And that moment brought a tear to my eye, because it was like, how sweet, this elderly gentleman that probably didn't have anything else at that point of be giving, chose to give a gift to my child that, whether my child needed it or not, didn't matter. It was the act in the moment of just wanting to share what someone had that would be of benefit to another. This is how our moments matter, and they add up. As I said, when moments turn into minutes, that's when the magic happens. And I've got quite sure that that elderly gentleman, he lived on in my thoughts long after that moment that mattered, as well as in my son's thoughts. And he's gone toward being one of those people of today that is working in a wonderful way to create tomorrow's world. So just in ending, I'll share the card that I picked today from the Abraham's Hicks collection, which is appreciation and love are identical vibrations, and it's how we change from that negative state. So appreciation and love are identical. It's the vibration of alignment with who you are. Appreciation is the absence of everything that feels bad and the presence of everything that feels good. When you focus upon what you want, when you tell the story of how you want your life to be, you will come closer and closer to the vicinity of appreciation. And that's like getting to that buffet table loaded with everything that we want, instead of that buffet table with just the rotten, crappy, expired food. And when you reach it, it will pull you toward all things that you consider to be good in a very powerful way. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Rosie Pekar on Until Now, W4CY. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you next week.